Good evening, friends, and I welcome you to this weekly program called Let's Talk. I'm your host Brijlal, and once again we have a very interesting community-related program. The program is titled Superkids. I have three guests this evening. They are Ms. Lisa Culler on my immediate right, Ms. Nancy Widows in the middle, and Ms. Barbara Cooper on her right. I welcome you all to the program.
Thank you.
I found your program of Superkids very interesting. I think it can be very useful to the community to know a little bit more about it. So I thought we'll talk about it. So as I said, let's talk. Lisa, let me start with you. You all three are directors of the organization, right?
Yes,
okay.
we are.
So let me first ask you, what was the purpose in mind when you started this program?
Well, we started it about 3 years ago, and two things came together for me at the same time that sort of prompted us to begin. One, I was working as a psychotherapist in Norwalk, and I was seeing a couple of patients who they were adults, but they were both describing childhood experiences of difficulties with their social skills, with social relationships. And they had been identified by their peers as being strange kids, different kids, and they carried with them into adulthood a burden of having been sort of out of sync, not fitting in, not being normal. Nobody understood them. As adults, they had, they found career paths that were successful. They still had some relationship difficulties, but they had tremendous bad feelings about their childhood experiences, and still didn't really understand what had gone wrong for them. There was that, and then there were friends of mine who lived in my community in Ridgefield who had children with difficulties in the same area and approached me and said, listen, you're a therapist, can't you do something for our kids? There's nothing...
You are a psychologist also?
I'm actually a clinical social worker. That's my background, but I have worked for 14 years or so as a psychotherapist, both with adults and with children. But when these friends approached me, I went to Nancy, who I was working with in Norwalk, who works with children, and said, maybe we should try something for these kids. Let's read, let's look into it, let's think about what we might offer for children who are struggling in this realm of social relationships. So we put out a flyer in the Ridgefield school system, and the night the flyer went out, we got 40 phone calls, which confirmed our suspicion that there was really a need for this kind of programming. So that was our first group. We rented space in the basement of a church, and we went into our first experience where, we started learning. And I think the kids learned something from us, and we learned a lot from the kids in that first experience. And we loved what we were doing and decided to continue along that path. So little by little, we've given up all the other things we were doing and continued with a focus of working with children who have difficulties in the area of social relatedness, social skill. So that's where we started from.
Right. Now, these kids are all, in a sense, very smart, though, in one sense. And yes, there is something that's lacking in them. Could you describe for me a little bit as to how smart they are, and then what areas are they lacking in?
Well, we see kids, if you start to think of social skills on a continuum, the same way you would think of how children do in math or how they do in reading. There are kids who do very, very well, and there are kids that don't do well and struggle. And what we found is that that the basis of that sometimes is neurological, that kids will have a certain area, kind of a concentration of difficulties that gets diagnosed and is a problem. Or they're just struggling socially for different reasons. Some are very anxious or shy, or different reasons. So We see kids who are basically, I think all of our kids are mainstreamed, meaning they're in the regular classroom, in a typical classroom. Some kids have an aide with them to help them sort of navigate that world of the regular classroom, and some kids don't. And all of them are pretty bright. I mean, some of them have real areas of genius, and creativity seems to be a place
some of them,
within.
like in the early stages of autism or something?
Some of the kids are would be diagnosed with high-functioning autism, or one of the related kinds of diagnoses, pervasive developmental disorders, Asperger's syndrome, nonverbal learning disability. They're all sort of related diagnoses, and many of the kids who we see do fall under those categories.
We also see kids with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, kids who are impulsive, or just have problems sustaining friendship for different reasons. So we do see a pretty varied, spectrum of kids also.
Okay, so now you realize that there was a need in the community for something, and you were able to diagnose what that need was. How did you go about achieving then your goal?
Well, we decided that after that first experience in the summer, that we really needed a space that was really specifically for doing group work with children. So we found that, and started looking for other people to work with us. Barbara came into the picture shortly thereafter, where we realized that the two of us were not enough staffing, and Barbara had actually been involved with both of us in a supervisory capacity, and so she joined us, and we started expanding to different age groups. We now work with children from age 3 all the way through high school, and we're in the process of putting together a young adults group as well. So we really now span a large age range. And as we went along, targeting the different needs of kids at different ages. For working with social skills with a 3-year-old is a different process than with a 16-year-old. The deficits are different. The way to address them is different. So we've been sort of fine-tuning our ways of meeting the needs of kids at different ages and stages along the way.
At this point, we have 4 other therapists that are working with us to facilitate these groups. Since the 3 of us, we have so many groups now that the 3 of us weren't enough. So it's pretty exciting. We're training the new staff. They come with master's degrees and their own kinds of experience, and we're working with them so that we can keep expanding and having a high quality of service. We're really invested in that.
But you also decided to have small groups rather than classes of 20 or 40.
Yeah, we have 6 kids in a group, 6 children, and 2 therapists. That's the maximum. The 2 therapist idea is different than some other groups might be. We feel that when we can relate to each other, the adults in the room, in a socially appropriate way, we model that for the children, and that's very important. So if I was leading a group with Nancy, for instance, Nancy and I would have a dialogue. Maybe I wanted to do one activity and Nancy was thinking of something else, and we would have to work it out in front of the kids. How do you work out a conflict? Lots of the kids that we see either walk away from it, storm away from it, get angry at the other child, go into their own world. They don't really know a lot of the time how to compromise, how to work through something. So we model those things for the kids. And I think that's a very successful part of what we do.
Okay, so now we know the problems with these children, and you know what you want to do. Could one of you explain to me as much as you can in detail how you actually work with the kids now to help them with their problems?
Well, what we do is we offer groups of that are 14 weeks in duration. We take a small break and do another 14 weeks. So we basically cover the school year. We find that's important for them to be involved in the group during the school year. And as Lisa said, it varies for different ages, but basically for an hour, if they're coming for an hour, the preschool's a little longer, but for an hour, The first half an hour is a structured activity, and we often offer something. We're creative arts therapists as well. Barbara and I are trained as art therapists, so we use a lot of art making, building, get the kids up and active, and they get to express something about their internal experience, which is really important for us. It helps us understand what's going on for them socially. And then usually during that experience, we bring it to the group. So for instance, we may say, if you were on a desert island, draw your island and draw everything you would need on it. And we've had varying things on there, Nintendos, TVs, and some people, think about survival skills and fire and things like that. But then what we do is once we have all the islands, and usually we can find out a lot of information from that island experience in and of itself, but then we have a large piece of blue paper and we say, okay, here's the ocean, put yourselves in the ocean, your islands. So in that mural experience, what happens is we see how much the kids want to connect or if they want to isolate. We've had kids cover their island with a barbed wire fence, or we've had kids make bridges and boats so they can visit the other islands. And through this metaphor, they really get to explain their social experience to us, and we get lots of information about it.
But Nancy, do you normally then try to develop what their interests are, or do you also try to widen their interest?
Absolutely. That's a very good question. A lot of our kids come with a very narrow frame of interest. It's part of Asperger's syndrome, which is one of the syndromes that we see a lot of kids with. They have very, help me out here.
A limited range of interest.
A limited range of interest. Yeah. So we try and stretch that. And, so they might draw their Nintendo on the island, but at least they're sharing an experience with their peers and, reaching out.
And when an island is covered in barbed wire, we might say, hopefully the other kids say, and sometimes they do, or we say, what is so threatening? Why do you need the barbed wire? And they will sometimes talk about how bullied they've been in school, how their lives have been filled with mistrust to their peers.
So Barbara, in a sense, while they are making these things, you are able to read their minds and also read further into their problems, which may not be on the surface of it, as to what their fears are, what their fantasies are, or,
So many kids isolate because they've had bad experiences with their peers. They've been bullied, they've been the butt of a lot of jokes and teasing at school, so they withdraw. And we try to make our groups, we have made our groups a very safe place for them to talk about that and to just be. And once one of the children talks about that kind of experience, the rest are nodding their heads and going, oh, that happens to you too? That happens to me. And so they have a shared experience to talk about, and then we help them brainstorm and strategize. How do you deal with this in school? How can you deal with this in a way that works? Because what do most adults say? Just ignore it. Does that work? And they all go, no. So we help them, and they actually help each other even more than we help them with strategies that work.
Nancy, I understand that some of these kids might also have inherent anger,
Oh, absolutely.
Which is sometimes.
And what's interesting about what Barbara said is that they sometimes come to us very isolated without any friends, and people misunderstand them a lot in their life and think they don't want friends, but almost always through these art experiences is what they've really made some touching things that you realize how lonely and sad they can be about not having friends. They've just given up because they don't have the skills and no one has seen their need because they've kind of hidden it under a shell.
The kind of thing that unfolds in the group, I can give an example, something that happened recently. Kids around 2nd, 3rd grade age, children, all boys, interested. It turns out that they all share an interest in roller coasters. So we don't really have a set curriculum for this reason. What we want to do is sort of follow where the children are at. So it turns out in the 2nd, 3rd group that the children all are talking. They're connecting around this interest in roller coasters. Some of them like to build them, some of them like to ride on them. But so the next week of the group, we decide we'll try and make a roller coaster with cardboard, with tape, with string. I provide the supplies, and I know that what's going to come up for these kids is each one of them has their own plan to be in charge, the captain of the roller coaster. They have decided the name, they've decided how it's going to look, they've made the plan, and then they're going to get there and they're going to face 5 other kids who have exactly the same thing in mind in terms of their role, but a totally different plan. And of course that's what happened. And then the work is, okay, how do you relate to a group of kids? How do you share? How do you take turns? How do you cooperate, compromise? All of these issues that come up every day in their lives are right there in front of us to work on. And you know, that's one of the ways in which the groups unfold and work.
You talked about roller coasters. I also know that kids are very fond of going to these again, I forgot the parks, you know, and other places.
Yeah.
Do you also, as part of your, if I may call yours as curriculum, or part of your program, something like an outdoors, you know, picnic kind of a thing where you might take these kids out somewhere?
We wish.
Not right now.
We haven't yet. We have gone to school plays, right?
Oh, yeah.
And seen our kids in different arenas in their life, but we haven't had. We've been trying to start a program where we do a little more of that, where they go out in the real world and they have field trips, and where they, again in small groups, to experience the world, and for a lot of especially the younger kids, one of our goals is just to have pleasurable social peer relations and experiences to outweigh some of the negative ones that they've had. So, we are looking towards doing that, and we're hoping to do it soon.
Yes.
I assume then all 3 of you ladies are trained to deal with these kind of problems, like if the kid has behavioral problem like too aggressive or too much introvert or something like that. Are you trained to do that, or have you self-educated, or what is it?
Well, we all have training as therapists from slightly different directions, clinical social worker, licensed therapist, art therapy, but there isn't really a training program that I'm aware of that prepares therapists to work with kids on the spectrum,
So
which
can
is
you,
what we call it.
one of you explain to me, if a child is too aggressive or something, or introvert, what do you do to solve that problem?
Well, we were all trained sort of psychodynamically to work with children in play therapy and expressive therapies. These kids we work with very differently because of their neurological issues. Though we want to get at their feelings and their experience, they also need some cognitive information. They need some psychoeducation, in a way, to help them understand what's going on around them in the world, because they miss a lot of that. So often we try and point out the reactions of their peers in the group. If a child is acting in a way that's overly aggressive, that child may not realize that he is scaring or turning off his peers. And what we do is, using the peers in the group, say, look at the faces of the children who are near you. See the reactions of what your peers are to, how do you think he feels? We'll ask the other kid, hey, you over there, how do you feel when he says he wants to blow up the world? What does that make you feel? And they get feedback then, and it's amazing how much they miss the feedback that just comes naturally, that most kids would pick up on.
You start the kids at 3 or 4 years of age. That's the time that so far they have been home most of the time. And even when you first try to put them in first grade or kindergarten, they are very reluctant to go. They are almost to be dragged. They are screaming and throwing a tantrum and all that. Does that happen also when they are brought to your school, or do they willingly come there and get...
Well, some kids experience separation anxiety from their parents if they're young, and it's a new experience for them. But usually after the first time they come, we provide a very safe environment. And when you talk about aggression, one of the reasons we have 2 therapists in the room is also we have a quiet room to take kids if they are feeling out of control, or if we feel like they're out of control. So usually when they're in those parameters of a safe environment, it feels very comfortable for them, and they're pretty happy to return. A lot of our kids, I mean, it depends on the age, but a lot of our kids come kind of running into the group each week. They really enjoy it. They enjoy the time with their peers. You know, and you know, what we think is also very valuable is that there are adults in the room that really understand them, because these are kids that are very misunderstood out in the world.
And also not well liked.
Right, and their behavior can look very intentional to people who aren't trained in these sort of deficits. So they can look almost like they're asking to be picked on or asking to be bullied, or when actually it's because they're overwhelmed, usually through sensory and stuff or their feelings.
You know, you're suddenly reminding me that over the years, we normally hear people, whether it's me or somebody else, we might go and visit somebody for the first time, see their children and say, oh, they're kids, they are so and so, or they are so much so, this, that, and the other. We categorize them, and not realizing that that kid really might have, and the parents who may be the last one to realize that there is a problem.
That happens a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So you feel that these kids really, in a sense, face kind of social challenges in their lives?
Absolutely.
Very much so. I work with the high school group, and most of those kids came in the beginning saying they never had a friend. Never had a friend in 16 years. So that's a sad thing. And they've become friends in the group so that they get together outside of the group. They go to the movies, they get together at each other's houses, and for some of them it's the very first experience with that. And it's very upsetting for me to hear that. So I really, really want to work with them on these skills so that they can go out and make friends and have those skills, and you know, that's what we reach for.
Now, some of your young kids will be starting schools, whether they're going to kindergarten or first grade or second grade, wherever. Some of them may already be in schools, you know. And I understand that you have even gone on to their schools to teach their teachers how to deal with these kids. And talk to me about that.
One of the things that's happened in education over the last probably 10 years is that the self-contained special ed classroom has sort of come to an end for the most part. And the children who were in those classrooms are now in mainstream classrooms. Their teachers might not have trained as special ed teachers when they were going to school to be teachers. So there's sometimes a gap between what the needs of the class are and what the teacher was trained for. And the teachers end up feeling badly about themselves that they can't do the job they want to do. They also might have, you know, 25 kids in a class with 2 or 3 children who really don't get the social scenario, can't read nonverbal cues, seem to be annoying and out of place. And it's very frustrating for the teachers. So we found that when we went into schools and gave seminars for the teachers on the profiles of these kids and tools for working with these kids, very simple ones, very, very simple ones, they were so hungry for the information and so grateful to learn how to do their job better that it's a win-win situation. The kids benefit from it, the teachers benefit from it, and they really come out with a different understanding.
We have a few minutes left, and I want to cover 2 or 3 other questions. So quickly, first of all, you do also get together with the parents of these kids, like at coffee clutches or something?
Yes, we do a support group for them every month. You know, Starbucks kind of environment. We also meet with the parents midway through the groups to give them a sort of progress report and hear from them how their kids are responding to the group and how things are changing in their outside world.
I think an important piece of what we do is sort of help the kids be understood as best as possible in all facets of their life. So that, you know, obviously their parents, but the school, we get involved with schools and you know, sometimes camps and things like that, and Girl Scouts, and just to have people understand that these are not intentional behaviors. These are things the kids just do, that they don't understand what they're doing, and they're in the process of learning. And
so you, Nancy, actually you try to also build up their self-respect and give them self-confidence and all that.
And help them to understand themselves also, to know that we all have strengths and weaknesses, and that they come to work on their weaknesses.
Now, your program grew like mushroom. And from a few students, now you have so many. How many you have now?
Approaching 60?
60.
Yeah.
60?
Yeah, 60. Yeah.
And you started with how many?
6.
Six. All within 2 years. And you have moved into larger quarters.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell us where your school is now.
We're at 898 Ethan Allen Highway in Ridgefield. It's right on Route 7. And we've added recently a tutoring program. So we work with Club Z, and they provide tutors, and we provide kids, and they do like a homework helpers kind of program that helps with organizational skills and
Study skills.
study habits.
And social skills.
And social skills as well. As well as a preschool play group that's just starting up for the 3 and 4-year-olds that meets twice a week. And also a recreational group.
Very briefly again.
Yes.
Can you tell us any of your future plans, what you may have in store?
Barbara, that's yours.
Barbara, quick.
Well, we're starting a young adults group. We find a great need for young adults that, with Asperger's particularly, that don't have a social network or a place to, work out what they're dealing with, life skills and that kind of a thing. We also are starting to train other professionals throughout Connecticut and branching that out. So the book is on the way, the training video is on the way.
And the offices around the state.
Yes, we're planning on opening an office probably in New Haven in September.
Great. Okay. Lisa,
Yes.
give a telephone contact or whatever else you want to give for your school.
203-431-9150.
431-9150.
50. For more information.
Okay. Friends, if you need more information about the program of Superkids, or if you have any children or you know of any children that might need their assistance from this group, please call up this number, get in touch with us for them. They are located, Superkids, in Ridgefield. Get in touch with them. Well, I thank you very much
Thank you.
for coming
Pleasure.
over. That's about all the time we have. So until next week at the same time, this is your host, Brijlal. Have a very healthy and happy week. Good night. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Darla Shaw, and I'm an associate professor in the Education Department at Western Connecticut State University. In my graduate education courses, we always talk about the role of the parent and how important this role is, that we as teachers cannot do the job alone. But so often, parents really don't know what they can do to help us, to aid us in their children's education. And tonight we have a very special guest with us. We have Dr. Jeffrey Schlicht. He works in the Physical Education and Health Department at Western Connecticut State University. Good evening and welcome, Jeff.
Good evening, Darla. Thanks for having me today.
We're so happy to have Jeff with us today. And we're going to be talking about children and adolescents and what you as a parent can possibly do to help them. But first, Jeff, could you give the viewers just a little bit of information on your background and how you come to this knowledge?
Okay. Educational background was way back in California, so I'm actually a left coaster. And I did my schooling out in San Diego. Got involved in sort of physical activity and wellness through a professor in the PE department at University of California, San Diego. Howard Hunt was his name, and he kind of turned me on to it. He ran his own little company that did wellness providing services for other businesses, and I started working with him just as I was finishing up my undergraduate work, and kind of got me into the whole field of promoting health through physical activity, since that was our backgrounds for the company. Moved from that position into pursuing a master's degree at San Diego State University, and then came out to Connecticut to finish up a doctoral work, and I got my degree in UConn, and then I came out here to Western Connecticut State University, where I've been teaching for a couple of years. I'm here in my third year.
Well, we're very pleased to have you on our staff. I know you've done